my CEO wife, Willow. Never imagined that postponing our anniversary dinner for a last-minute company meeting would cost her our marriage. When she came home, all she found was a single piece of paper, the divorce agreement I'd left behind. It was only then that she realized, after 5 years of marriage, she had long turned breaking promises into a habit, and taken my one-sided devotion as something that would last forever. She thought I would tolerate her endlessly, never once considering that one day I might walk away without hesitation. But when I finally let go of our love, she couldn't. Within a week, the headlines exploded. Renowned financial queen gives up career to search for her husband. The entire city was stunned. Chapter 1. The air in the meeting room felt frozen. More than 20 people's eyes were all fixed on that woman, someone I knew too well. Even if it were just the back of her in a photo, I would still recognize her instantly. Third quarter financial results are 12% below expectations. And your explanation is market factors. She tapped her fingers lightly on the table as she spoke, her calm yet cutting tone making me instinctively straighten my back. She stood up. The sharp lines of her tailored suit matched the authority in her voice. She didn't need to speak loudly. No one in that room dared to interrupt. I want a full analysis of every issue and the corresponding solutions, on my desk before 10 tomorrow morning. President. Tomorrow's Saturday, someone murmured timidly. So, her brows arched slightly, her gaze sweeping across the room. Silence fell instantly. I used to love that ruthless self-discipline and strength of hers. Now, all I felt was exhaustion. Dinner, we had planned it together. Our wedding anniversary. It took me 2 months to book that window seat at La Seine. I sent her favorite roses there ahead of time, along with the pair of brooches she had hesitated over at an auction. I'd bought them for her. When I arrived at the restaurant, the waiter asked several times if I wanted to order. I smiled and said, "I'll wait a bit longer." Even I didn't know what exactly I was waiting for. At 8:15, my phone buzzed. Last-minute meeting. Eat first. Her messages were always short, precise, not a single unnecessary word. I stared at the screen for a long time, then slowly called the waiter over and handed him a brown envelope. "When Miss Liu arrives, please give this to her." By the time she rushed into the restaurant, I was already gone. I imagined her expression when she opened the divorce papers. Would she finally frown for once? Or would she, as always, calmly sign her name and ask her lawyer about the next steps? I didn't know, and I didn't want to know anymore. When she came home, I was sorting through my files. She stormed in, slammed the papers onto the table. "What is this supposed to mean?" Her voice trembled, not from sadness, but from anger. "The literal meaning," I said calmly, as if we were negotiating a business contract. "Because of one dinner, you're divorcing me over one missed dinner?" I shook my head. "It's not about dinner." I took out my phone, opened a few screenshots, her chat history with the new investment director, Makoto. One particular line was circled. "Tonight's discussion was very pleasant. Looking forward to a more in-depth exchange next time." She snapped instantly. "That was work. You think I'm cheating on you?" "I don't." I rubbed my temples. "I know you didn't cheat." But when I saw that message, my first thought was, at least someone else still gets your time. She froze, as if drenched in ice water. "You know how busy I am." "I know. It's been 5 years. Willow." I let out a bitter laugh. 5 years of being second to your parents, your business partners, your fitness coach, even your mother's friends. And me, I was always last on the list. Those screenshots just made it clear to me, I can't keep lying to myself. I picked up the suitcase I'd packed days ago. "The house is yours. Sign the papers and let me know. Everything else, talk to the lawyer." When I closed the door, she didn't call after me. Maybe she already knew, calling wouldn't change a thing. She found the diary, the one I had intentionally left for her. On the very first page, it read, June 15, 2018, married Willow today. She said the honeymoon has to be postponed. There's a new project starting. It's fine. We have plenty of tomorrows. Back then, I truly believed in plenty of tomorrows. I had written down too much. 2019, my birthday. Willow bailed again. The cake melted. The piece with ice cream was her favorite. I couldn't bear to throw it away, so I ate it the next day. 2021, Lunar New Year. She chose to work overtime. I went to my parents' place alone. Mom asked why she didn't come. I said she was on a business trip. She would never know how perfectly I cooked the lamb chops that day. She would never know how many client dinners I declined, just for one of her hugs. I forgave her again and again, convincing myself each time, she's just too busy. She doesn't mean it. But deep down, I knew the truth. I was never part of her schedule. I wasn't one of those meetings marked in red on her calendar. I wasn't her mother's weekly reminder about herbal soups. I wasn't even as important as the location updates her fitness coach sent her. I was simply someone labeled, can be rescheduled anytime. Now she had finished reading the diary, finally realizing that it wasn't that I didn't love her. It was that she had never cherished me. At 3 a.m., I stood on the balcony of my small rented apartment, smoking the cigarette she used to hate. The winter air was freezing. but I didn't feel cold at all. I had finally let go, and she had finally learned that what she lost wasn't just a night, a dinner, or a few text messages. She lost the men who had always waited for her to come home. And I finally understood. Some people, you give them an entire spring, and all they return is a passing breeze. Chapter 2. Monday morning. Inside the company elevator, the moment Willow stepped in, the lively chatter quieted down a few degrees. Several young employees pretended to scroll on their phones, though their sneaky glances betrayed their curiosity. "Good morning, President," said Martin from the marketing department, forcing a polite smile. Willow nodded in response, her posture rigid and straight. She could feel the shift in the air, that thick, heavy silence before a storm. When she entered her office, her assistant Maria followed quickly behind, hesitating to speak. "Say it," Willow said as she set down her bag, her tone sharper than she intended. "President," Maria bit her lip before continuing. "There are some rumors going around. People are saying that Mr. Wong filed for divorce because, you're too strong-willed." Willow's fingers tightened on the edge of the desk, her nails almost digging into the wood. She should have expected this. In an environment where gossip spread faster than KPIs, her private life was bound to become the hottest topic. Who started it? "I'm not sure, but yesterday Director Makoto was chatting with some people in the break room for quite a while." Willow's gaze sharpened. Makoto, the newly hired investment director last month, Harvard MBA, solid performance, but something about him always felt off. Noted. "How's the prep for the 10 o'clock project kickoff meeting?" Maria blinked, clearly thrown off by Willow's abrupt topic shift. "Everything's ready. But, are you okay, President?" "I'm fine." Willow forced a professional smile. "Get back to work." Once the door closed, her shoulders finally slumped. Her phone lit up, a message from her mother. "I heard you two divorced. Come home tonight. We need to talk." Willow flipped the phone face down on her desk, a sudden urge to smash something rising in her chest. Chapter 3. At the project kickoff meeting, Makoto spoke with his usual confidence. He had used far too much cologne today. The strong, heady scent made Willow's temples throb painfully. "I believe we should take a more aggressive approach with this merger," Makoto said, leaning forward, his elbow nearly brushing against Willow's arm. "What do you think, President?" Willow subtly shifted away, her expression unreadable. "I'll need to see the supporting data first." "Of course," Makoto smiled, flashing the self-assured grin that always felt just a little too practiced. He tapped on his phone a few times. "I've just sent some supplementary files to your inbox. Speaking of which, about that proposal we discussed last Thursday, have you given it any more thought?" "What proposal?" Willow frowned. "The one we talked about last Thursday night." Makoto gave a knowing wink. "You said you were looking forward to a more in-depth exchange, remember?" The room went silent. A chill ran down Willow's spine. Last Thursday, that was the exact date on the message screenshot George had shown her. Now she understood. A simple, routine work discussion, taken out of context, could sound unbearably suggestive. "Director Makoto." Willow's voice turned icy. "Let me make this clear, all our communication must remain strictly professional. If there has been any misunderstanding, now is your last chance to correct it." Makoto's smile faltered. "Of course, I just meant, continue the meeting." Willow cut him off, turning to the others. "Finance department, your analysis, please." After the meeting ended, Willow immediately called Sophia. Sophia had been her college roommate, now a lawyer, and one of the few people who knew the details of her divorce. "I need George's address," Willow said without preamble. There was a pause on the other end before Sophia spoke. "What are you planning to do?" "Talk to him. At least, apologize." "Willow," Sophia sighed softly. "He's living in a temporary apartment on the east side of the city. But that's not the point. Do you know he quit his job?" "What?" Willow nearly dropped her phone. "When?" "A month ago. He rented a small workshop, started a pottery studio." Sophia's tone carried disbelief. "Honestly, you two were married for 5 years, and you never knew he loved that?" Willow opened her mouth to argue but found herself speechless. George had occasionally molded small clay figures at home, but she'd always thought it was just a hobby, a way to pass time. Is he doing well?" she finally asked, her voice dry. "From what I've heard, yes. My husband stopped by last week, said he's actually pretty talented." Sophia paused, her voice gentler now. "Willow, maybe this separation is for the best. You never really knew him, did you?" The words pierced Willow's chest like a knife. She hung up quickly, afraid Sophia would hear the crack in her voice. Chapter 4. 7 p.m. At the Liu family villa, Willow's mother, Sandra, sat on the leather sofa, her perfectly maintained face marked with disapproval. "I told you that George wasn't good enough for you," Sandra said, taking a delicate sip of her tea. "If you hadn't insisted back then." "Mom," Willow interrupted, "it was my fault, not his." Sandra arched a perfectly drawn eyebrow. What nonsense. He's just an ordinary designer. Marrying you was already a stretch for him, and now he has the nerve to ask for a divorce. He filed for divorce because I neglected him for 5 years. Willow's voice rose. Because I always put work first. Because I don't even remember what he likes or hates anymore. Sandra set her teacup down with a sharp clink. And what's wrong with working hard, without your career? Would he have enjoyed such a comfortable life? Men are never satisfied. Does Dad feel the same way? Willow shot back. You've controlled him so tightly he doesn't even dare to go golfing anymore. Is he happy? Sandra's expression darkened. Watch your tone. Willow took a deep breath. I don't want to repeat your marriage. George is a good man. I was the one who failed him. Ridiculous. Sandra scoffed. You're just being weak. Men need control. Direction. You let him do whatever he wanted. And now that he's left you, you're defending him. Willow stood up, her hands trembling as she grabbed her bag. I have to go. Stop right there. Sandra's voice snapped like a whip. Next week, the Chan family's son is back in town. I've arranged for you to meet him. He's 10 times better than George. No. Willow turned around, meeting her mother's eyes. For the first time, she felt an unfamiliar calm. I'm not going, Anne. I'm going to win George back. Even she was surprised by her own words. But somewhere deep inside, a quiet voice told her it was the right thing to do. Sandra stared at her as if she'd gone mad. Have you lost your mind? The daughter of the Liu family chasing after a man who dumped her? Maybe I have. Willow smiled faintly. But going crazy once is better than regretting it for a lifetime. Stepping out of the villa, the night wind cooled her burning cheeks. Willow took out her phone, hesitated for a long time, and finally typed. Heard you opened a studio. Congratulations. If possible, I'd like to visit. She sent the message and immediately turned off her phone, not because she didn't want to see his reply, but because she was afraid there wouldn't be one. Now, she stood across the street from Peakview Pottery Studio, hesitating for 15 minutes. The studio, converted from an old factory, was modest, red brick walls covered in ivy, a half-open black iron gate, faint music drifting from inside. I thought I'd never see her again, but 3 days ago, I received her text. After much hesitation, I replied. Saturday afternoon at the studio. If it's business-related, you're welcome. Just one short sentence, polite, distant, treating her like an ordinary client. That afternoon, sunlight streamed through the skylight onto my work table. I sat at the pottery wheel, hands cupping the moist clay. Folk music filled the studio, gentle as a spring breeze. The clay rose slowly under my fingers, my breathing syncing with the rhythm of the spinning wheel, focused, steady, peaceful, until I felt a gaze from the doorway. I didn't turn around. I simply slowed the wheel, wiped my hands, and said quietly, "Can I help you?" And just as I expected, it was her. Willow stood there, wearing a perfectly tailored trench coat, still every bit the professional woman, except the sharpness in her expression was gone, replaced by a hint of caution. She hesitated for a moment, as if she'd forgotten how to speak. I just happened to be passing by. Thought I'd take a look at your studio." I raised an eyebrow slightly. Passing by. This place isn't on the way to your office or your home. A flush crept up her neck. She had never been good at lying. I'd always known that. In the 5 years we were married, her most frequent lie was, "I'll be home soon." I didn't press further. I simply wiped my hands clean, walked toward the shelves, and began placing the freshly made pots on the rack to dry. Her gaze drifted around the room, searching for something to say, something to fill the silence. "These, you made all of them?" I nodded. Yeah. I wasn't interested in showing off or explaining. She'd never cared before, never asked what I actually did at the ad agency. Never even knew the projects I was in charge of. The air grew heavy between us. I thought I'd just let her look for a few minutes and leave. But then her eyes landed on the vase I'd just been working on. This one. The moment she reached toward it, I said coldly, "The center of balance is off. It's going to collapse." Then, without hesitation, I pressed the clay down, crushing the shape entirely, and tossed the lump back into the reclaim bin. I heard her draw in a small, startled breath. The vase could have been saved. All it needed was a bit of reshaping. But I had no intention of fixing it, just like I had no intention of fixing our marriage. A cracked vase isn't worth mending. Why start doing this all of a sudden? Her voice trembled slightly. I mean, pottery. You never mentioned it before. Turning my back to her, I dropped the clay into the water bucket, my tone as calm as if I were telling someone else's story. I minored in ceramic art in college. Work got busy later, so I let it go. She was quiet for a moment. You never told me that. I finally turned to look at her, really looked at her. You never asked. I watched the way that single sentence struck her. She didn't cry. She didn't argue. She just stood there, stunned, then forced out a small, awkward comment. The studio name is interesting. Peakview. Is it taken from your name? Leaning against the sink, with damp clay still on my fingers, I looked at her and replied evenly, though there was a subtle edge in my voice. Not entirely. In ceramics, Peak view refers to a rare glaze pattern, random, uncontrollable, impossible to replicate. I paused, meeting her eyes, watching understanding dawn there for a fleeting second. Like certain moments in life, I said quietly, once you miss them, they're gone forever. The words chilled the room the moment they left my mouth, but I couldn't soften, not now. If I did, she might think there was still a way back. Her shoulders trembled faintly, as if struck by something unseen, but she said nothing. Then thunder cracked outside. Within seconds, rain poured down, drumming hard against the tin roof, as if the sky itself was breaking open. I walked to the window and pulled down the shade. Looks like you'll be here for a while, I said. This rain's not stopping anytime soon. She didn't answer, but I could tell she didn't want to leave. Or maybe she was waiting for me to give her some kind of sign. Tea? I asked, my voice neutral, the way one might speak to a casual visitor. Okay, she said softly, nodding. I turned toward the small kitchenette in the corner. The sound of boiling water and the faint fragrance of tea leaves unfurling in the cup, all of it was familiar to me. I warmed the cups, measured the leaves, poured the water, each step unhurried, deliberate. I could feel her gaze on my back, tinged with curiosity, the same kind that always came too late. She had always arrived too late, understood too late, felt too late. You quit your job for this? She asked as she accepted the cup from me, her voice careful, almost fragile. Sitting on the work stool opposite her, with just enough space between us, I replied evenly. Not entirely. 10 years in architectural design was enough. I was tired. I took a sip of tea, then added quietly. I'm 34. If I don't start doing what I actually want now, I might never get the chance. She hesitated. But, can you make a living from this? I looked at her, of course. That was her first question. A faint smile curved my lips, without warmth. Exactly what I expected. I gestured around the studio. It's breaking even. Not as profitable as before, but it's enough to live on. I didn't mean it like that. It's fine. I interrupted gently. Our values have always been different. Outside, the rain intensified. The world beyond the walls faded into a muffled blur. She stared at the wall calendar, the one marked with my upcoming exhibition dates and appointments. You have an exhibition? She asked. Next month, I said truthfully. A small joint one. Some friends and I are organizing it. She didn't reply, but I could tell what was running through her mind. Back when we were married, I had suggested visiting countless galleries, museums, art fairs, and she had always said, I'm too busy. Now, I finally had an exhibition of my own, and she finally had the time, but she was no longer the person who needed to be there. When the rain softened, she set down the teacup and stood. Thank you for the tea. I should go. I nodded, making no effort to stop her. At the door, I asked, do you have an umbrella? She shook her head. I knew she did. There was one in her bag, but I still reached behind the door and handed her the long black umbrella. Take it. What about you? I can wait until the rain stops. I made sure to avoid brushing against her fingers. Even that brief contact felt out of place now. She took the umbrella, then said quietly, it's hard to get a cab around here. Could you walk me to the subway? I hesitated. I wasn't sure if it was out of obligation or some reflexive kindness I'd never fully shaken off, but I sighed, grabbed my jacket, and said, let's go. We walked one behind the other through the drizzle. I held the umbrella, instinctively angling it away from her, the distance between us filled by rain, by air, by everything that used to be. Do your parents know about you quitting your job? She asked. I shook my head. Not yet. They've always been proud that I worked at a top design institute. They'll understand, she said softly. I glanced at her, slightly surprised by her gentleness. It was a tone I'd almost forgotten she could have. Maybe, I murmured. When we turned the corner, the neon glow of the subway station came into view. Then she said, almost too quietly, are you hungry? There's a place nearby, home-style dishes. I remember you used to like that sort of thing. I stopped in my tracks, ready to decline, but then she added, just think of it as my apology. I looked at her for a few seconds, rain light flickering in her eyes, and finally, I nodded. All right. We walked into a small noodle shop and took a seat by the window. Rain streaked down the glass, blurring the outside world into something that looked like a watercolor painting. As I unwrapped my chopsticks, I asked, how have you been lately? It was the kind of casual question that used to open all our married conversations. But now, the moment I said it, her eyes turned red. Not great, she said softly. There've been rumors at work about our divorce. I frowned. What kind of rumors? That I was too overbearing and scared you away. She let out a small, self-mocking laugh. Funny, isn't it? I always thought being strong was a virtue. I looked at her, my tone softening. You don't have to care about what they say. What happened between us, no one else will ever really understand. She lifted her eyes to meet mine. There was both hope and regret in them. George, about those messages. It's over. I interrupted gently. I know it was just work talk. The problem was never the text itself, it was everything it represented. The waiter arrived with 2 bowls of beef noodles. Interrupting the moment, I poured chili oil into my bowl. Almost without thinking, an old habit I hadn't realized I still carried. She watched me quietly for a while, then said, "You've changed a lot." I shook my head. "No, I've always been like this. You're just seeing it now." Her expression froze. I could tell she was remembering. All the nights I'd waited alone. All the times she brushed me off with "next time." The sketches I'd kept hidden away. The anniversary she'd forgotten. And finally, she understood how many disappointments had been buried beneath every quiet "it's okay." Then, softly, she said, "I want to get to know you again." I looked up, my gaze tightening inch by inch. "Why?" "Because," her voice trembled, "I realized maybe I only loved the version of you I imagined. The real you, I never truly knew." I stayed silent for a long time. The sound of rain outside filled the space between us. Finally, I shook my head slowly. "It's too late." Willow. Chapter 5. Monday morning. As Willow stepped into the company lobby, she spotted Makoto leaning casually against the reception desk, holding 2 cups of coffee. "Good morning, President." He greeted her brightly, offering 1 cup, double espresso. "No sugar." I remembered correctly. Right. Willow accepted the cup reluctantly, maintaining a polite distance. "Thank you, but there's no need for that." "It's no trouble," Makoto replied easily, walking alongside her. "I've had some new thoughts about Friday's proposal. How about lunch together to discuss?" There were other employees in the elevator, and Willow could feel their glances darting between them. She cleared her throat. "If it's work-related, bring it up in the official meeting." Makoto chuckled, unfazed. "You're too serious. I heard Mr. Wong is out of the picture now. You should give yourself more social opportunities." Willow froze mid-step, blood rushing to her head. "My private life is none of your concern," she said sharply. "And remember, we are just colleagues." She turned and strode toward her office, leaving Makoto standing there. Once the door shut behind her, she tossed the untouched coffee into the trash, her hands trembling slightly. Her phone buzzed. A message from Sophia. "How did the weekend go? Did you meet the pottery master?" Willow typed back, "I did. He treated me like a regular client." Sophia replied almost instantly, "At least he saw you. Don't give up. By the way, are you coming to the class reunion on Friday?" Willow was about to refuse, then paused. "Is George going?" "He wasn't planning to, but my husband talked him into it." "Why?" "Planning an accidental encounter." A faint smile tugged at Willow's lips. Maybe, just maybe, she still had a chance. "President, this is the 3rd revision of the proposal." Maria placed a stack of documents on her desk, hesitating. "Do you have any specific preferences for the corporate gift design?" Willow looked up from her screen, absently twisting the ring finger on her left hand, where her wedding band used to be, leaving only a faint pale mark. "It needs to be unique, artistic, something that reflects our company culture, but not too commercial, like the style of Mr. Wong's studio," Maria blurted out. Willow's hand froze mid-motion. She lifted her gaze toward her assistant, who immediately turned red. "I'm sorry. I just noticed the ceramic cup on your desk last time. It looked really special." "It's fine," Willow said, relaxing a little, the corner of her mouth curving upward. "In fact, that's a good idea. Contact Peakview Pottery Studio and tell them we'd like to order 200 custom business gifts." Maria blinked. "Should I contact Mr. Wong directly?" "No," Willow said, picking up her phone, her voice calm but resolute. "I'll handle this one myself." Chapter 6. The studio looked tidier than the last time she came. I'd added a few new display shelves, lined with my latest creations, from plain mugs to carved vases, each with a small tag beneath it. When she entered, her gaze swept across the works, as if she were really looking, or maybe just finding an excuse to stay a little longer. 200 custom teacups. I put down the half-finished design sketch and looked up at her, my brow instinctively furrowing. "Are you serious?" She sat gracefully on the client sofa, legs crossed elegantly, her smile perfectly measured. "Very serious. Corporate annual gifts. The budget is generous." My fingers tapped the table unconsciously, a habit I barely noticed. "Mass production isn't really my specialty. You should find a gift company, but you're capable of it, aren't you?" She gestured to the old certificate hanging on the wall. "I read your background. You worked on large public art projects during your master's degree." I froze slightly. She'd looked up my background. "That was 10 years ago," I said flatly. "Skill doesn't disappear." She leaned forward a little, her tone so soft I couldn't tell if it was a client's coaxing or an ex-wife's gentle plea. "Consider it giving an old customer a chance." I caught the deeper meaning behind her words. My lips twitched, but I didn't respond to it. "I'll need to draft the design first. You can see the sample in a week." She immediately followed up. "Can I come by the studio to check the progress? It's an important project for the company, after all." I looked up at her. There was a spark in her eyes, as if she already knew I wouldn't say no. eventually. I nodded. Suit yourself. Chapter 7. After that, she came almost every other day. Each time, she brought her laptop, claiming she needed to work while keeping an eye on things. But I knew, her eyes often lingered somewhere beyond the documents, resting on me instead. She probably hadn't expected that I'd become this focused, this efficient. Maybe, in her memory, I was the quiet one waiting for her to come home after a dinner engagement, the one who cooked and waited. But now, what she saw was someone else entirely. That afternoon, I was teaching a new apprentice how to throw clay, a young girl who had just started. Standing behind her, I guided her hands, explaining how to control strength and angle. Relax your wrists. Feel the spin of the clay. Yes, that's it. Slowly lift upward. I'd said similar words to Willow once. Was it when I taught her to cook, or when she practiced yoga? I couldn't remember anymore. When I turned around, she was still sitting there. Her laptop was open, but the screen hadn't changed for a long time. I cleared my throat softly. President. She looked up abruptly, as if waking from a dream. Interested in trying, I gestured toward the pottery wheel. Me. She pointed to herself. Surprised. I smiled. You're not really focused on your work anyway. Why not experience how the thing you're paying for is made? To my surprise, she actually closed the laptop and walked over to sit at the wheel. I watched her hover her hands above the lump of clay, looking tense and unsure. What do I do? She asked. Wet your hands first, I instructed. Then gently wrap them around the clay. It's alive, you have to guide it, not control it. She followed my words, but her first touch was too heavy, and the clay immediately went off-center. She grimaced. I messed it up. I smiled faintly. It's fine. Start again. In pottery, impatience is the greatest mistake. The second time she tried, her fingers were no longer so stiff. The lump of clay began to rise slowly, forming a reasonably neat cylinder under her palms. I didn't say a word, just stood beside her, watching the careful concentration on her face. I did it, she exclaimed, her voice bright with excitement, like a child who had just aced a test. I couldn't help but chuckle. Don't celebrate too soon, this is only the beginning. Her smile lingered, her eyes shining. But in that very moment, her movement grew a little too forceful, too much pressure, and the clay suddenly twisted out of shape. Instinctively, I wanted to tell her not to panic, but she was already reacting on impulse, trying to fix it. 3 deep scratches from her fingernails ran across the soft clay. I'm sorry. She jerked her hands back, freezing in place. I saw her purse her lips unconsciously, like someone bracing for a scolding. Maybe that was how she had been reprimanded as a child, or how she used to snap at others. But I simply turned off the wheel without saying a word. Standing up, I gently removed the deformed clay from the wheel, kneaded it back into a ball, and tossed it into the water bucket. Clay has memory, I said. Once its structure is damaged, forcing it further only makes it worse. I saw surprise flicker in her eyes, as if she hadn't expected me not to be angry. She stared at me, dazed. You're not mad? She asked softly, her voice uncertain, almost timid. I glanced at her and shook my head. Why would I be? She looked even more puzzled. Every beginner goes through this, I said, taking another lump of clay and handing it to her. And you didn't ruin a piece of art, just a bit of clay that hadn't yet taken form. But I ruined your work, she murmured. It's just clay. I shrugged lightly. Besides, failure is part of creation. It teaches you to respect the material, and to be patient. She didn't reply, but I saw something shift in her expression. That look. I knew it too well. It wasn't simple regret, it was the realization that she'd been wrong for a long time. And now that she finally understood, she had no idea how to turn back. We'd been married for so many years, yet only now was she truly hearing what I'd been saying all along. And what I said wasn't just about clay, it was about time, ideals, every bit of passion and persistence she'd ignored. Want to try again? I asked, holding the new piece of clay out to her. She looked at me and nodded. This time, she didn't smile, she didn't speak, she just sat quietly at the wheel, wet her hands, placed them gently on the clay, and began to turn the wheel, slowly, steadily. I stood beside her, watching as the lump of clay spun beneath her palms, rising, warping, gathering, unfolding. In that moment, her expression finally reminded me of the Willow who had always belonged to her work, calm, composed, focused. But this time, she was quiet not because of a contract or a meeting, she was quiet because she was feeling something with her hands, letting herself touch the world for once. Maybe she had never truly understood me, but at least for that fleeting moment, she was trying to. President, here's the report you asked for. Maria placed a folder on the desk, her eyes flicking curiously to the small clay bowl Willow was turning in her hands. Is that one of Mr. Wang's pieces? Willow smiled faintly. No, I made it. Pretty ugly, isn't it? It's very artistic. Maria chose her words carefully, then suddenly seemed to remember something. Oh, by the way, did you know? There was a time last year when Mr. Wang often waited for you outside the company. Willow's hand froze midair. When was that? Around November, I think. It was already really cold, Maria recalled. One night, I worked late, it was past 9, and I saw him standing across the street by the coffee shop. I asked if he wanted me to let you know, but he said no, that you didn't like being disturbed when you were working. Willow's chest tightened painfully. Last November, that was the height of the annual merger project. She had been working almost every night until dawn. She couldn't remember at all that George had been waiting for her. He did that often? She asked quietly. Maria nodded. Later, I chatted with the security guard. Oldley. He said Mr. Wong came 2 or 3 times a week. Sometimes he waited for hours. Oldley wanted to go up and tell you, but Mr. Wong always refused. Said you were under a lot of pressure and he didn't want to bother you. Willow's vision blurred. She remembered that winter, every time she came home late, George would have hot tea and supper ready. He never complained, never asked where she had been, and she had never noticed the frostbite on his hands from waiting outside in the cold. President, are you all right? Maria asked softly, concern in her voice. I'm fine. Willow quickly wiped the corner of her eye. Thank you for telling me. After her assistant left, Willow pulled open the drawer and took out George's old journal. She flipped to the entries from last November, and there it was. November 15th, Willow's been working for 36 hours straight. Went to her company to try to convince her to rest. Saw her office light still on, but didn't dare go up. Last time I interrupted her meeting, she got really angry. Bought warm milk and left it at the front desk. Asked Assistant Zhang to give it to her. Hope she at least remembers to eat. Willow closed the journal, clutching the misshapen clay bowl tightly against her chest, and at that moment, she finally understood the real reason George had chosen to divorce her. It wasn't that he'd stopped loving her, it was that her indifference had hurt him so deeply. There was simply nothing left for him to wait for. Chapter 8. It was Friday afternoon. I was discussing glaze color formulas for a new cup design with Alicia. She was a bright kid, a graduate student at the Academy of Fine Arts who came by on weekends to help out, interning while borrowing the studio equipment. I liked that kind of collaboration, quiet, unintrusive, focused purely on creation. She held up a mixture of blue-gray glaze, suggesting a subtle metallic gradient along the rim. I nodded, offered a few adjustments. We worked smoothly. There was a rare sense of wordless understanding between us. Just when I thought it would be another peaceful, fulfilling day, the door opened. I turned my head, and there was Willow, standing by the entrance, holding 2 cups of coffee, her smile a little stiff. Her eyes flicked between Alicia and me, and for a second, everything seemed to freeze. Willow, I called out instinctively. Alicia turned around too, curiosity sparking in her gaze, probably wondering who this woman was. Sorry, I didn't know you had company. Willow forced a polite smile, raising the coffee cup slightly. I just came to bring you some coffee. I walked over and took one from her. My fingers brushed hers briefly before letting go. Thanks, I said, keeping my tone as even as I could. Then I turned to introduce them. This is Alicia, my cousin. She's a grad student at the Art Academy. Helps out here on weekends. Alicia, this is Willow, my. Before I could finish, she said it for me. Ex-wife. She extended her hand, like she wanted to make a point, or maybe just mock herself. Nice to meet you. Alicia's eyes widened. Oh wow, you're the legendary finance queen. Mr. Wong talks about you all the. Alicia. I cut her off immediately. Could you glaze the bisque-fired batch for me? Alicia blinked, then caught on quickly. With a mischievous grin, she slipped away to the other side of the room. What was she about to say? Willow asked, her tone calm but her eyes giving away a flicker of curiosity, or was it something else? I coughed lightly, steering the topic away. Nothing important. The design drafts are finished, want to see them. I led her to the display table, where 5 sample cups stood in a neat row. Each one had been made with a different technique, distinct firing curves, subtly varied textures. Even the logo at the bottom had been reworked into an integrated design. Her fingers brushed along the rim of one cup, her touch slow, deliberate, almost reverent. They're perfect, she murmured. Just fundamentals, I said, trying to sound casual, to stop my emotions from spilling out. Pick one. We can start mass production next week. But she didn't answer. Instead, she looked up at me, and asked something I never expected. After the divorce, have you ever regretted it? I froze for a split second. Why are you asking? I managed to keep my voice steady, because I have. Her gaze locked onto mine, eyes as bright as they were on the day we got married. So bright I couldn't hold them for long. Every single day, she added. I took a deep breath, but before I could answer her, the door opened again. That voice, I knew it all too well. Willow, I knew I'd find you here. I turned around. Makoto stood at the doorway, holding a bouquet of red roses like he'd come to make a declaration of war. Willow's hand jerked back from the cup she had just touched, as if burned, and I felt the faint ripple in my chest go completely still. Her tone turned cold. I don't recall we had plans today. Last-minute idea. He raised the bouquet with a practiced smile. The most beautiful flowers for the most beautiful woman. From the corner, I heard Alicia give a soft, disdainful snort. I didn't stop her. Her instincts were rarely wrong. Willow didn't take the flowers. I saw the flicker of embarrassment cross her face, but she steadied her voice. I'm in the middle of a business discussion. Oh. Makoto arched a brow, his gaze shifting toward me. I thought you two were finished. The words were casual on the surface, but the provocation underneath was deliberate. I kept my composure, pushing down the heat rising in my chest. We are discussing business. The president commissioned us to make the company's annual gifts. He scanned the studio, his eyes sliding over the shelves and tools, the clay and glazes, as if he were appraising a small-time craftsman's shop. This kind of tiny setup can handle a corporate order. Willow, I know several suppliers far more professional than this. Before I could respond, Willow spoke first, her tone sharp as ice. Director Makoto, first of all, address me properly, it's president. Second, my business decisions don't require your input. And lastly, please leave. For a moment, I was stunned. In 5 years of marriage, she had never once stood up for me in front of anyone. And now, she didn't even hesitate. Makoto's smile faltered. He slammed the bouquet down onto the work table. Suit yourself. Then he stormed out, the door slamming so hard that the small ceramics on the shelves trembled. Silence spread like still water. Sorry, Willow murmured after a while. I cleared my throat softly. It's fine. Have you decided on the design? She pointed to one of the prototypes. This one. Thank you. As I began wrapping the cup, her phone rang. She answered, and her face immediately changed. There's an issue at the company. I have to go. I nodded. Go ahead. I'll have Alicia deliver the sample tomorrow. No need. I'll come pick it up myself. She gathered her things, then hesitated, her eyes flicking toward the roses still lying on the table. There's nothing between Makoto and me, she said quietly. My hand paused mid-wrap. You don't owe me an explanation. I know, she replied softly, but I still wanted to make it clear. Chapter 9. When Willow returned to the company, the crisis was worse than she had expected. A major investment project's financial model had a serious error, one that could cost the company tens of millions. Recalculate everything, she ordered, voice firm and cutting through the tense silence. Legal. Review the contract terms immediately. I want any possible exit clause found now. The team sprang into motion, keyboards clattering, phones ringing, numbers flashing across screens. But Willow knew this would be a sleepless night. By 1 a.m., most of her staff were utterly exhausted. She finally told them to go home and rest, staying behind alone to go through the reports herself. Her fingers hovered over the contact labeled George in her phone. For a moment, she almost pressed call. In the past, whenever work crises hit, George was always the calmest person she knew. On those long nights, he would listen quietly as she vented, then point out what she'd missed, always from an angle she hadn't considered. Her thumb lingered above the screen for several seconds, before she withdrew her hand. She couldn't rely on him anymore, not like before. Not as if she still had that right. Outside the window, the city's lights were fading, leaving only a few scattered glimmers. And in that silence, Willow finally understood those nights described in George's journal, the ones where he waited for someone who never came home, worried but too afraid to disturb her, eventually falling asleep alone. By 5 in the morning, they had finally found a solution. Willow slumped back in her chair, utterly drained, her eyes burning from fatigue. The coffee on her desk had long gone cold, leaving a ring of dried residue at the bottom, as murky as her spinning thoughts. President, Maria peeked into the room, her voice soft but startled. Did you stay up all night again? Should I get you some breakfast? No, thank you. Willow forced a smile. Is everyone ready for the 9 o'clock emergency meeting? They've all been notified. But maybe you should go home and rest first. Willow shook her head. No time. She pushed herself up from the chair, and a wave of dizziness hit so suddenly she had to grab the edge of the desk for balance. President, Maria rushed over in alarm. You're pale. Are you all right? I'm fine, Willow waved weakly. Just low blood sugar, probably. Wait here. Maria ran out, returning minutes later with a small box of chocolates. Please, eat this first. I'll call Mr. Wong to come pick you up. Willow's head snapped up. Why George? Maria blinked. Because, last time you were sick, She stopped mid-sentence, realizing her mistake. Last time, when? Willow pressed, her voice low but urgent. Last December, I think, Maria said softly. You'd been working over 40 hours straight and came down with a bad fever. Mr. Wong came to get you. Stayed at the hospital all night. He told me not to mention it, said you didn't like people seeing you when you're weak. Willow's throat tightened. She had no memory of that night, just a blur of the hospital ceiling and the 4-needle in her hand. She'd always assumed it was her assistant who'd taken her there. There's no need to call him, she said at last, voice faint but steady. I'll be fine. Chapter 10. By the time the meeting ended, it was already 3 in the afternoon. Willow had forced herself through 2 grueling hours of crisis management. Now she felt completely drained, like something inside her had been hollowed out. When she returned to her office, she stopped short in surprise. There was a thermal lunch bag sitting neatly on her desk. "What's this?" "A delivery from Alicia," Maria explained. "Mr. Wang's cousin. She said he told her to make sure you eat it while it's still warm." Willow opened the bag and found a neatly packed lunchbox inside, steaming shrimp congee with a few side dishes, all perfectly arranged, all her favorite flavors. Underneath the lunchbox was a folded note. "Eat on time. Go, go, George." Just that simple signature was enough to make Willow's eyes sting. She remembered how, whenever she was sick, George would cook the same shrimp congee, explaining how shrimp added protein, ginger warmed the stomach, and scallions brought aroma without being too strong. "President." Maria's voice was soft, uncertain. "Are you all right?" Willow quickly wiped the corner of her eye. "Yes. Tell Alicia I said thank you. She already left." "But," Maria hesitated. "She mentioned that Mr. Wang talked to Miss Sophia on the phone last night. He heard the company was in trouble, so he made this for you." The spoon froze midair. So George had found out through Sophia, and he'd stayed up, worried enough to cook and send food through his cousin. That quiet warmth spread through her chest before she could stop it. After finishing the congee, she felt noticeably better. She opened her laptop, ready to dive back into work, only to notice an unread email from an unfamiliar sender. The subject line read, "Some thoughts on the financial model." She clicked it open. It was a thorough analysis of the very crisis she had been dealing with, clear, professional, and precise. The message pointed out several risk factors she had overlooked, and even suggested potential solutions. There was no signature, but the phrasing, the way of thinking, it was unmistakably George. Her heart began to pound. Without thinking, she called Sophia. "Did you tell George about what's happening at my company?" Sophia's voice instantly turned guilty. "He just asked how you've been, and I might have mentioned you were dealing with a work problem." "Why?" "He sent me an email," Willow said quietly. "Anonymous. About the project. Let me guess, no name." Sophia chuckled softly on the other end. Classic George, always helping in silence, pretending it's nothing. Willow bit her lip. "Does he still ask about me? Often?" "What do you think?" Sophia replied. "Every time we meet, the first thing out of his mouth is, 'How's Willow?' He still can't let go, just keeps pretending he already has." When the call ended, Willow sat staring at the email for a long time. Finally, she clicked reply, and typed just one word, "Thank you." Chapter 11. It was 10 at night. I sat in the noodle shop downstairs from my studio, staring at the bowl of soup noodles that had long gone cold. The screen of my phone lit up, no new messages. I didn't even know what I was waiting for. I went to her apartment today. The door code was still the same, my birthday. She hadn't changed it. I didn't know what that meant, and I didn't dare to think too much about it. I just left the ribs and vegetables on the kitchen counter, glanced at the photo wall. Our wedding photo was still there, covered in a thin layer of dust. I left a note. "Eat on time. Go." When I stepped out, I lingered at the doorway for a long time. The door wasn't locked. I almost turned back, but I didn't, because I knew if I went back inside a second time, I might never be able to leave again. Before leaving, I placed some medicine and vitamins by her door. Alicia had mentioned she'd been looking pale lately. I didn't know in what capacity I was doing these things anymore, ex-husband, friend, no one. All I knew was that when she was tired, she always forgot to take care of herself. And I'd gotten used to quietly filling in those small gaps she left behind, the ordinary parts of life she always overlooked. I didn't tell her I had been there today. Didn't tell her I'd seen the wedding photo still hanging on the wall. Didn't tell her I stood outside for 20 minutes, trying to summon the courage to type in that code, the one that once belonged to us. I just hoped that maybe, even because of these little things, she'd eat properly, rest on time, and live a little gentler with herself. Chapter 12. It was late Friday night. I was already in bed, ready to sleep, when my phone rang. Alicia's name flashed on the screen. "Brother, Willow's burning up," she said in a panic. "I brought her congee, but she can barely stand." I sat up instantly. "She's home alone." "Yeah. Are you going to do something about it or not?" I hesitated for a moment. "I'm coming over." "No need," Alicia interrupted. "I'm already here. Just call her tomorrow." "Okay." Then she hung up, but I couldn't sleep after that. I sat in the living room, staring at my phone, the way I used to stare at it when she was on business trips, waiting for her to text that she'd landed safely. I wasn't her husband anymore, but my chest still clenched tight whenever she was sick. I knew she wouldn't tell me what was happening. She never did. She wouldn't admit how hard it was to face things alone. Just like in those 5 years of marriage, she always downplayed everything, always smiled through exhaustion, always said, "I'm fine," but she wasn't fine. She just didn't know how to say she wasn't. That's why I kept doing it, cooking, leaving notes, dropping off medicine, umbrellas, reminders, being the invisible stranger who never intruded, but always showed up when she needed someone most. I knew I shouldn't get close again, but I'd never truly left. If she could just eat well, rest properly, and not burn herself out with another fever alone, then maybe the small things I did still meant something, because I once loved her so deeply. And now I could only love her like this, quietly. As the ex-husband she no longer saw, the thermometer beeped sharply through the phone. Before I even heard the rest, Alicia's voice trembled on the other end. 39.6 degrees. Brother, you were right. My mind went blank. I didn't catch anything she said after that. I didn't even put on my shoes properly, just grabbed my medical kit and ran. It wasn't the first time she'd had a fever, but before, I was the one sitting by her bedside all night, not leaving her for a second. Now, she wouldn't even say, "I'm not feeling well." I raced up the stairs, heart pounding. Alicia opened the door, and I rushed past her straight into the bedroom. Willow was curled up in bed, her face flushed red, eyes hazy with fever. The confident, sharp, high-heeled executive I'd known was now fragile, like a small flame about to go out. "How long has it been?" I asked, trying to sound calm, though my fingers trembled. "Since last night, started with a headache." Her voice was barely more than a whisper. I had to lean close to hear. I reached out, pressing my palm gently to her forehead. It was burning hot, worse than I'd feared. My hand slid to the side of her neck, feeling her pulse. "Too fast. Needs to go to the hospital," I said immediately. "Don't." She grabbed my sleeve. For a fleeting moment, it was just like those nights long ago, when, half asleep, she would unconsciously pull me back into her arms. "Let's start with physical cooling." I looked into her stubborn eyes, my chest tightening as if someone had clenched their hand around my heart. "Alicia, bring a wet towel. The medicine's in the kitchen. Please boil a bowl." Alicia moved quickly, like she had expected this all along. Once she left, I pulled a stethoscope from my bag. I'd brought it myself, knowing there was a chance I'd see her again, yet never really waiting for her to ask for help. "I need to listen to your lungs." She nodded. She had always hated hospital procedures, but she never refused when I examined her. I pressed the stethoscope against her back. Even through the thin nightgown, I could feel the heat of her skin, and the uneven rasp of her breathing beneath it. "Take a deep breath." She inhaled once, then coughed violently, her body trembling. I frowned, lowering my voice. "There's a wheeze in your lungs. If the fever doesn't drop by morning, you have to go to the hospital." "When did you start practicing medicine?" Her voice was weak, like wind brushing past the edge of glass. I packed the stethoscope away and tried to sound light. "My dad's a traditional Chinese doctor. I grew up surrounded by it." I paused, glancing at her. "You never knew?" She shook her head, the motion small, but I caught the brief flicker of confusion in her eyes. Of course she didn't know. In 5 years of marriage, she had barely come to my family's house. Each time, she brought her laptop and phone, and would leave within 10 minutes. Alicia returned with the wet towel. I took it from her carefully and placed it on Willow's forehead. She let out a long breath, as though she'd finally been released from torment. "I'll go make the medicine," Alicia said, and as she walked out, she even winked at her. Then there were only the two of us. I sat by the bed, adjusting the towel every now and then, making sure it wasn't too cold or too warm. Her face was still flushed under the light, fine beads of sweat sliding down her temple and into her hair. "You work. There's nothing scheduled at the studio today." My voice softened before she could say more. "Don't talk. Save your strength." She seemed to want to speak again, but before she could, her eyes slowly closed. The medicine was taking effect, her body finally surrendering to exhaustion. I shouldn't have stayed, but her fingers still clutched my sleeve, and in a faint, dreamlike voice, she murmured, "I'm sorry. I was wrong. I shouldn't have ignored you." My hand froze midair, then she pulled my hand against her burning cheek, as if searching for something familiar, something safe. "I know," I whispered at last. Maybe she really did, but so what? I watched her drift into deep sleep, wiped the sweat from her forehead, and replaced the fever patch. When Alicia finished boiling the medicine, I asked her to leave it by the bed and wrote a note for Willow to see. "Take 1 dose every 4 hours. Alicia's in the guest room. Call her if you need anything. I'll check on you in the morning." Go. I looked at her one last time. Her breathing was steady, her face less flushed. She slept quietly, peacefully, just like the early years of our marriage, when she still trusted me enough to lean on me. As I closed the door behind me, I heard a voice in my head ask, "Do you still want to go back?" I didn't answer. Not long after I got home, my phone lit up. "Thank you, the medicine's bitter." I stared at those words for a few seconds, the corner of my mouth twitching. Then I typed, "Bitter medicine works best. There's porridge in the fridge, heat it up before eating." As my fingers paused, an image flashed through my mind, her sitting up in bed, a fever patch on her forehead, frowning as she swallowed the medicine. She had never been good at taking care of herself. Too strong, too proud, even her illnesses had to be endured in silence. I leaned back in the chair and closed my eyes. She finally admitted it was bitter. 5 years ago, she would never have said that. She used to say, medicine is medicine, not dessert. What's there to fuss about? Now she said it was bitter, as if she'd finally allowed herself to show weakness in front of someone. I couldn't quite tell what I was feeling. Pity, weariness, or a tenderness that came too late. Then the phone lit up again, a message from Alicia. A photo. Willow was sitting up in bed, holding a notebook, writing intently. In the corner of the photo, I could see a sticky note she had put there herself. Maybe you could start writing your own diary, Alicia. I couldn't help but smile. Alicia was always a bit mischievous, but this time she was right. She did better than I ever did. The photo wasn't clear enough to see what Willow was writing, but I could guess the first line probably wasn't something like financial summary or quarterly objectives. I shouldn't overthink it. Her fever just broke. That doesn't mean anything. Chapter 13. For the next 3 days, I kept taking care of her, coming over twice a day, morning and evening, bringing herbal porridge I'd cooked myself, medicinal herbs, a thermometer, and a kind of concern I refused to admit even to myself. I tried to keep everything precisely measured, nothing more and nothing less. I changed the wet towel on time, logged her temperature on my phone, and varied her meals each day. But every time she tried to talk to me for more than a few moments, I'd find an excuse to leave. She was getting better, her face slowly regaining its color. Sometimes I caught her lying on the sofa, looking at me like she wanted to say something, and I would pretend not to notice, forcing myself to keep calm as I said, "Get some rest, I'll come by tomorrow." I knew she was testing me, but I also knew I couldn't let myself fall back in again. Did she regret it? Maybe, but I'd already given too much. I couldn't let a few meals and a few soft apologies shake me so easily. On the morning of the 4th day, her fever finally broke. I left earlier than usual, careful not to wake her. In the kitchen, I left a bowl of congee, her favorite kind, with lotus seeds, lily bulbs, and lean pork. Gentle on the stomach, comforting to the heart. And as usual, I left a note. Fever's gone. Get some rest. Contact Alicia if you need anything. Go. Yes. I didn't even sign my full name. I didn't dare to. After stepping out the door, I didn't go straight to the studio. I sat in the car for 10 minutes instead. The phone screen lit up with a system notification. The loan application I'd submitted last week, still not approved. I opened the email. The bank's reason was predictably official: unstable cash flow, insufficient collateral. I gave a bitter laugh and looked up at the sky. I knew the studio's accounts inside out. We could hold out for now, but if we couldn't sell a few large pieces next month, I'd have to start cutting operational costs. Did she know? I wasn't sure. I hadn't told her, and I didn't want to. I'd always hidden my struggles from her. She was always busy, always carrying the weight of everything herself, and I didn't want to add to it. I wanted her to see me as steady, thoughtful, a husband who never needed her to worry. But in the end, she couldn't even bring herself to call me husband anymore. And I was afraid that if she ever reached out now, it would be out of pity. And that, somehow, would hurt even more. But maybe, she had already noticed. Or maybe she was quietly doing something about it. A strange sense of unease crept over me. I knew her too well. When she made a decision, she never told me in advance. Chapter 14. By the weekend, Willow had finally recovered. Her mother, Sandra, called, her tone as sharp and critical as always. "I heard you've been sick. I told you long ago not to overwork yourself. Now you see the consequences, don't you?" "I'm fine now," Willow replied calmly. "That George guy still coming over to take care of you?" Sandra sneered. "How fake. If he really cared, he wouldn't have divorced you." Willow gripped her phone tightly, suddenly feeling a surge of anger, not at her mother, but at herself, for having tolerated such remarks for so many years. "Mom," she interrupted softly, "I was the one who asked for the divorce." There was a pause on the other end of the line. "What?" "George gave me the divorce papers," Willow said, taking a deep breath, "but I was the one who signed them because I was selfish, blind. I couldn't see what he gave, or how much he was worth." "Nonsense." Sandra's voice rose. "Worth? What worth? He doesn't even have a stable job." "He's talented," Willow said firmly. "His pottery is admired by professionals in the field. His studio is still young, but it has potential. And more importantly, he's kind, thoughtful, patient, all the things I lack." "Have you lost your mind?" Sandra shouted in disbelief. "Did he brainwash you or something?" "No, Mom." Willow's tone was steady, calm in a way that felt new even to herself. "I just finally see things clearly. I love George, and I'm going to win him back." As the words left her lips, she froze. It was the first time since their divorce that she had said those words out loud, and meant them. Sandra exploded on the other end. "You must be, Mom." Willow interrupted gently. "This is my life, my choice. Please respect it." When she hung up, a strange sense of relief washed over her. She opened her laptop and began drafting a proposal, a plan to help George's studio attract high-end clients. without hurting his pride. Just then, the doorbell rang. The screen showed Alicia, standing outside with a large paper bag. Willow opened the door, and the girl grinned brightly. "Mr. Wong sent me with supplies." And, she added with a mischievous wink, "He'll be meeting a client at OP Cafe tonight at 7. If you happen to pass by, I won't say a word." Willow's heartbeat quickened. "Why are you helping me?" Alicia's smile softened. "Because it's obvious you two still love each other. You're just both too proud to admit it." She handed over the bag. "Mr. Wong deserves happiness, and you're the only one who can give him that kind of happiness." Inside the bag, along with food and medicine, was a small handcrafted ceramic jar filled with honey lemon candies, Willow's favorite whenever she had a cough. She opened the husband-finding diary and wrote on a fresh page, "May 25th, I must learn to love George the way he once loved me, quietly, but everywhere." Chapter 15. Through the tall glass window of OP Cafe, I saw her at once, Willow. She was wearing a dark blue dress, simple, elegant, perfectly composed for this mild weather. The pearl earrings she wore caught my eye immediately. I recognized them, the birthday gift I'd given her when I turned 30. She sat in a corner seat, from there she could see the door, but she wasn't easy to notice. That was her style, calm, measured, always leaving space between herself and the world, gentle, yet restrained. I had actually arrived a few minutes early and stood outside for a while before going in. Today I wore a light gray shirt and black slacks. I'd had my hair cut the night before, not for any particular reason, just a sudden thought that I needed to look sharper. I walked straight to the reserved table by the window, keeping my eyes forward, or maybe I was simply afraid to look around too deliberately. I had barely sat down when David appeared. He was the investment director from MT Capital. Lately, he'd been reaching out to discuss possible collaboration. I wasn't sure if Willow knew him, but I'd never mentioned his name to her. As we shook hands, he smiled politely. "Mr. Law recommended I come see your work," he said. I nodded, modestly replying, "Mr. Law is too kind, to be honest." David continued, "I don't know a thing about pottery, but Law told me your design philosophy is unique. The opportunity to join the International Crafts Exhibition this time was thanks to his introduction." I said. I hadn't told Willow about that. Not because I didn't want to, just because there hadn't been a chance. "Any issues with funding?" David lowered his voice. "I heard you've been having some difficulties lately." I tapped the rim of my coffee cup lightly with my finger. "Small studios are like that. Cash flow problems are common. But recently an anonymous client placed a large order and paid 50% up front. That's eased things a bit." That order. I truly didn't know who it came from, but judging by the technical details they requested, it had to be someone who knew the craft well. "Anonymous?" David chuckled. "Maybe a secret admirer who's been in love with you for years." I shook my head. "Just a regular business deal. The client insisted on strict confidentiality. Even my staff don't know who it is." At that moment, the waiter brought our drinks, cutting the conversation short. I was about to say something else when David suddenly asked, "By the way, do you still keep in touch with Willow?" My fingers froze against the cup. I looked up at him but didn't answer right away. Instead, my eyes instinctively drifted toward the corner. She was still there. "Occasionally," I said, keeping my tone neutral. I knew David's question wasn't mere curiosity. He was the kind who smiled as he probed. Each sentence meant to test a reaction. "Mr. Law told me he was surprised when you two got divorced." David went on casually. He took a sip of his coffee, then added, "He said you gave up that Berlin project back then, just to marry Willow." My gaze dropped. I didn't respond. Did she know? No, she didn't. I never meant for her to know. "Let's not talk about personal matters," I said, my tone turning colder. "Apologies." David raised a hand in mock surrender. "It's just a pity. Law said you were the most promising designer of your class. That project could have saved you 10 years of struggle." I didn't answer. Was she still there? I didn't dare look up to find out. Chapter 16. An hour later, Willow was sitting in Duncan's office. Several old project files spread open before her. Duncan was a man in his 50s, with silver at his temples and sharp, perceptive eyes. "I worked with George for 7 years, he said, sliding a file toward her. "He was the most talented designer on our team. This," he tapped the folder, "was the Berlin project, a joint design opportunity with some of the top architectural firms in the world. The kind of offer that comes once in a decade." Willow opened the file. George's name was listed clearly, followed by the note, "Politely declined." May 2018. Duncan continued, sighing. 2 weeks before your wedding, he came to my office and asked to withdraw from the project. Said his fiancée's career was taking off and that moving to Berlin wasn't an option." Willow's throat tightened. That was around the time she'd been promoted to vice president. She really couldn't have left her position then. But she couldn't even recall George mentioning any of this to her. And that's not all. Duncan pulled out more files. 2019, director position for our Shanghai branch. 2021, guest lecturer offer from NYU School of Architecture. He turned them all down. Each document hit her like a hammer. Her trembling fingers brushed over the pages, records of every chance George had silently given up. For the first time, she realized that in their marriage, the sacrifices had never been equal. "Why are you telling me this?" she asked hoarsely. Duncan met her eyes. "Because last month, George came to see me. He asked if the Berlin project could still be reconsidered." He hesitated, then added quietly, "He said, he has no reason to turn it down anymore." The words cut through her chest like a knife. No reason to turn it down, because he was divorced now, because she was no longer the reason he stayed. He deserves a better opportunity, she managed to say, her voice barely steady. "I'm not here to judge your relationship," Duncan said, shaking his head. "But as George's friend, I can tell, he's not happy. That pottery studio of his, it's not a dream, it's an escape." Willow frowned. "I thought he truly loved what he does now." "Loved it." Duncan gave a weary smile. "George started painting as a child. Architecture was his lifelong passion. Pottery, that was just an elective hobby in college." The revelation left Willow stunned. All along, she had believed George was simply a late-blooming ceramic artist, never realizing it was what he turned to after giving up his real dream. Then why did he choose pottery? "Because it gave him flexible hours," Duncan said, his tone heavy. "He could match his schedule to yours." He paused, then added quietly, "President Liu, George is one of the most self-sacrificing men I've ever met. But people who sacrifice too much, eventually, they burn themselves out." When Willow stepped out of Duncan's office, the city street felt like it was spinning around her. She needed to see George, now, immediately. She jumped into a cab and went straight to Peakview Pottery Studio. But the studio's door was locked. A sign hung at the entrance, "Closed today." Just as she turned to leave, a deliveryman called out, "Excuse me, are you Ms. Liu? I have a package here for Mr. Wang." Almost without thinking, Willow took the parcel. Before she could ask anything, the courier was already gone. She hesitated, then dialed George's number. "Hello." His voice came through the receiver. Background noise buzzing, machinery, chatter. "Maybe a warehouse." "It's me. I'm at your studio. There's a package for you." "Willow." George sounded surprised. "I'm at the East Side Building Materials Market. Could you leave it by the studio door?" "The passcode's still the same." "No," Willow said quickly. "I'll bring it to you. There's something I want to talk about." There was a pause on the other end. Then he said quietly, "All right, I'll send you the address on WeChat." Chapter 17. The East Side Building Materials Market was even more chaotic than I'd imagined. It wasn't the kind of place I liked to visit, but for that batch of custom ceramic tiles, I had to oversee things myself. The samples had just arrived. I crouched down, inspecting the glaze along the edges. Sunlight slanted through the high steel roof, mixing with the smell of cement and dust, making my head throb a little. Then I heard that voice, soft, familiar, from behind me. "George." I turned around and saw her. Willow stood beside a stack of tiles, heels clicking lightly against the concrete, a package in her arms. The sunlight made her face look pale. "Thanks," I said, keeping my tone steady. "You didn't have to bring it over yourself." She didn't answer right away. She just looked at me, and in her eyes was something I couldn't quite read. "I wanted to see you," she finally said, her voice thinner than I remembered. "I just came from seeing Duncan." My heart skipped a beat. I set down the sample tile, gave a few quick instructions to the shop clerk, then led her toward the small rest area at the back of the market. "What did he say?" I asked. I tried to sound calm, but my fingers were unconsciously tapping the table. She sat down, eyes lowered, and spoke in a rehearsed tone, almost too calm. "The Berlin project, the Shanghai director position, the NYU visiting professorship." I closed my eyes, my shoulders tensed, almost imperceptibly. She knew. A short, bitter laugh escaped me. "So what if you know now? Would you have given up your vice president seat to go to Berlin with me?" She hesitated for a few seconds, then said quietly, "No." I nodded. "I wasn't surprised, but you should have told me," she said suddenly, lifting her gaze to me. Her eyes held something I'd never seen before, hurt. "I had the right to know what you gave up for us." I turned my head away, avoiding her stare. "It doesn't matter," I said under my breath. "It was my choice." "It does matter," she burst out, her voice trembling. "I thought you were just content, unambitious. I had no idea how much you sacrificed for our marriage." Something inside me, something that had been stretched thin for years, finally snapped. I met her eyes and said, for the first time, the words I'd been holding back for so long. "And what now? You found out. So you feel guilty, want to make it up to me, like that anonymous client you arranged." Her eyes widened, she almost leapt to her feet. You knew." "David told me," I said with a short, cold laugh. "He said the third-party contact was one of your company's old partners. You thought I wouldn't notice." "Willow, I don't need your pity. I don't need your charity." "It wasn't charity," she said desperately, her voice breaking. "I saw your studio's financial report. I just wanted to help. Just like the past 5 years of our marriage." I cut her off. You always think you know what everyone needs. You decided where we lived, where we spent vacations, even which suit I should wear to meet your parents. You never asked what I wanted. And now, even after the divorce, you're still doing it. She froze, stunned, as if it had never once crossed her mind that her consideration and planning could feel, to me, like another form of control. Then I saw the color drain from her face. She swayed, bending forward suddenly in pain. What's wrong? I stood up instantly, grabbing her arm. I'm fine, just an old problem. She gritted her teeth and forced herself upright, fingers pale from strain. But the next moment, another wave of pain hit her, hard. She nearly collapsed. Don't push yourself, I shouted, catching her before she fell. My car is close. I'm taking you to the hospital. I'm really fine. I just need some medicine. Enough, I snapped, lifting her into my arms. She was far too light. It hurt just to feel it. You're white as a sheet. I couldn't stay calm. No matter how broken our marriage had become, no matter how many cracks had formed in this love, the moment something happened to her, I still couldn't help but panic. She was still the one person I couldn't let go of. Chapter 18. My car still smelled faintly of sandalwood. Willow once said she liked that scent, so I kept the habit. Even after we separated, I never changed it. She was curled up in the passenger seat, her face still pale. The pain seemed to have eased a little, but the sheen of sweat on her forehead told me she was still forcing herself to endure it. I glanced at her from time to time, pressing harder on the gas pedal than usual. It's probably my stomach ulcer again, she said weakly. Too much work stress lately. I gave a short, humorless laugh. You always have an excuse. Last time it was a merger, before that a quarterly report. Willow, your body isn't made of steel. She didn't argue. Maybe she really didn't have the strength. When the car stopped in front of the studio, she looked startled. Not the hospital. Let's take the medicine first. See how you respond, I said, getting out and unbuckling her seatbelt. If it doesn't get better, we'll go. I've got some on hand, and some porridge I made. She didn't protest. I half-held, half-supported her into the small rest area. It was a simple space, a sofa bed, a mini fridge, and the little kitchen setup I'd built myself. She'd been here before, but back then, she never even glanced around. I turned to boil water, grabbed the medicine, and reheated the porridge. My movements were the same as years ago, when I used to take care of her during her fevers. Only then, she'd be drinking porridge with one hand while editing PowerPoints and taking client calls with the other. Now, finally, she was quiet, leaning against the pillow, watching me work. Feeling any better? I asked, setting the bowl in her hands and sitting by the bed. She nodded slightly. It was yam and pork rib porridge, her favorite, especially when her stomach acted up. George, she murmured, about those opportunities. I'm really sorry. Don't. I cut in gently. I told you before, it was my choice, but you weren't happy, she said. I didn't reply right away. I looked toward the light through the window. It wasn't about happiness. Marriage is about compromise. It's just that. I compromised more than you did, and in the end, I burned myself out. Her hands trembled as she set the bowl down. These months, I've been reading your old journals, your sketches, she said softly. I realized I never really knew you at all. I gave a faint, bitter smile. And now you do. What am I then? A fool who doesn't know how to stop sacrificing himself. She shook her head quickly and suddenly reached for my hand, eyes glistening with tears. No, you're someone who loved me more than I ever imagined. I instinctively tried to pull my hand away, but she held on too tightly. Her tears finally fell. I was wrong. I was so wrong, her voice cracked into pieces. I thought success was everything. I thought it was natural for you to step back. I didn't realize how blind I was until I lost you. I didn't speak. I just looked at her, a heavy, restless ache rising and falling in my chest. These past months, I've been secretly following your studio's page, she said through her tears. I watched your new works, watched you so focused at the potter's wheel. That version of you, I'd never seen him before. Maybe the man I thought I loved was never real. Maybe he was just the version of you I invented in my head. Willow, let me finish, she whispered, choking on her words. Today I finally understand how much you gave up for me. But I don't want you to sacrifice for me anymore, George. I want you, the real you. Your dreams, your stubbornness, your joy, your frustration. If you're still willing to give me another chance. I didn't answer for a long time. The room was too quiet, so quiet that the faint noise of the marketplace broadcast outside drifted in through the window, like the sound of a world that no longer belonged to us. I looked at her, and what flashed before my eyes was the image of her 5 years ago, wearing a gray coat, turning back to smile at me during the wedding rehearsal. And then, 2 years ago, sitting on the sofa in the conference room, frowning as she said, "You should reconsider. The Berlin project isn't realistic for you." I wanted to hold her. God, I really did. Even now, even after everything, I still loved her. But I said softly, That's exactly the problem. She froze. I went on. I still love you, Willow. But love isn't enough for us to start over. Her eyes widened. Tears broke free, pouring down like a dam giving way. I stood up, turned, and carried the empty bowl into the kitchen sink. I didn't know if she followed me. All I knew was that with my back turned to her, my chest felt like it was being torn apart. I hadn't expected her to actually lock away her work phone. It was the first business phone I'd ever given her, the familiar black case now closing with a small click. Like she was sealing away the old Willow who once measured her entire life by efficiency and results. You're seriously not bringing your work phone? I asked, raising an eyebrow so high it nearly touched my hairline. She tucked a loose strand of hair behind her ear and smiled with a kind of ceremony. Rule number 1 of dating, full attention. She only brought her personal phone, on silent. We'd agreed to start over, like two ordinary people, learning about each other again, without the weight of titles or old habits. Not remarriage, reintroduction. Today was our first official date. For the past 2 weeks, we'd only met occasionally, chatting about the weather, new exhibitions, trivial things. Neither of us mentioned Berlin, or the anonymous client, or the marriage that didn't survive. She made the restaurant reservation, but I mustered the courage to make a suggestion. Actually, there's a new art cinema showing a Theo Angelopoulos retrospective. I paused, then added, almost apologetically, if you don't mind. To my surprise, she nodded without hesitation. I love that idea. In that moment, I felt something I hadn't in years, an easy, weightless calm. She wasn't controlling every detail anymore. She was giving me space and giving herself a chance. The film was long, eternity and a day. I sank into it completely. For the first time in a long while, I felt the quiet tremor that only art could bring, not the kind tied to exhibitions, commissions, or survival. I knew she was watching me, secretly, but I didn't turn around. For once, it wasn't a one-way gaze between us. When the movie ended, we went to a small cafe nearby. I told her about how I'd minored in film theory in college, about framing, lighting, rhythm, about how some directors used silence as language. She listened, absorbed, her eyes glowing. When did you get so into film? She asked, smiling softly. I wanted to tell her, before I met you, that afterward, all my time had belonged to her, but I didn't blame her, and I didn't want her to blame herself. She asked, if you could go back, would you change anything? I said, no. Without all those mistakes, we wouldn't be sitting here now. Her eyes glistened again, and I simply reached out, and gently took her hand. Chapter 19. At 3 in the morning, my phone started vibrating on the nightstand. The caller ID showed Willow. That wasn't like her. Even though we'd reconnected, our relationship wasn't at the point where she'd call me at this hour. I picked up, hello. On the other end came ragged breathing, and between gasps, a broken word. Hospital. I was instantly awake, sitting upright. What happened? My dad. People's Hospital, Heart. Her voice was a mess, words tripping, trembling, fighting to get out. Where are you? I'm coming right now. She didn't answer again. I threw on jeans and a t-shirt, already heading out the door as I dialed Domingo. His brother-in-law was the deputy director at People's Hospital. I didn't know if he could intervene in an emergency surgery, but at least he could tell me what was happening. When I arrived, it was 3:25 a.m. The ER lights were painfully bright, but the corridor was cold and empty. I texted Domingo back. He confirmed the lead surgeon was Professor Kim, and arranged for a post-op care team just in case. When she arrived, she practically stumbled through the entrance. I rushed forward, catching her bag, and her almost collapsing body. The surgery just started, I told her. Professor Kim's performing it. He's one of the best. Your mom's upstairs, 5th floor, outside the operating room. She blinked, dazed. How did you know? I pressed the elevator button and kept my tone steady. I called Domingo on the way. Her hands were shaking, gripping my sleeve so tightly I could feel the tension in her fingertips. She was holding herself together, but only barely. On the 5th floor, Sandra sat slumped on a bench outside the operating theater. Her makeup had run. Her eyes were red and swollen. The doctor said the artery was badly blocked. She choked. They're putting in a stent. I forced calm into my voice. Professor Kim is experienced. The success rate is high. I've already arranged the post-op care team. Try not to worry. She looked up at me. For the first time, I saw something in her eyes I'd never seen before, approval. It didn't move me exactly, but somehow, I felt that. For once, tonight, I'd done something right. The next 6 hours crawled by like a slow-motion film. Willow sat beside me, her knuckles white, silent the entire time. I went out to buy coffee and sandwiches. When I came back, she was leaning against the wall, eyes closed, pretending to rest, though I could tell she hadn't slept at all. I held out the coffee to her. She didn't take it, only lifted her gaze slightly. Your phone's about to die, I said. I'll find a charger. She nodded, not refusing this time. She'd always been that independent. So independent that even when she was falling apart, she tried to look perfectly composed. She didn't realize I could see right through it. At 8:30 a.m., the light above the operating room finally went off. Professor Kim came out, removing his mask. His tone was calm. The surgery was very successful. The relief barely hit me before Willow's body gave out. I caught her as she slumped forward. When her head fell against my shoulder, I felt the weight of everything she'd been holding in, finally breaking loose. Professor Kim explained a few post-op instructions. The patient couldn't be visited today, he said. Come back tomorrow. I looked at Willow, then at her mother. I'll take you home to rest for a bit. I told Sandra, you should change clothes. Eat something, otherwise, you'll both collapse. She hesitated, then nodded. No argument, no resistance. When I drove her home, she was silent the whole way. I half expected her to say something cutting, maybe, where were you when it mattered? Or, you're meddling again. But instead, just before getting out, she whispered, thank you. I didn't turn around. Standing outside that hospital in the pale morning light, I only knew one thing. I wanted Willow not to be afraid anymore, even if we were no longer each other's destination. As long as she needed me, I would still be there. Not for a title, not for a reason, just for her. Chapter 20. At 6 a.m, I stood by the bench outside the ward, holding a stack of freshly printed medical reports. The doctor had just finished his rounds and said the recovery was going well, but I still liked to double-check everything myself. Willow arrived a few minutes later, carrying a bag of breakfast and her father's clean clothes. There were faint shadows under her eyes, clearly. She hadn't been sleeping well these past few days. Still, when she saw me waiting by the door, she frowned slightly and asked, why are you here so early? Couldn't sleep. I handed her the reports. Post-op vitals are stable. The inflammation markers are dropping. Professor Kim says he's recovering faster than expected. She nodded as she flipped through the pages, then suddenly paused at one section. The Starry Foundation. Isn't that the sponsor of my dad's old research project? My chest tightened, but I managed to keep my tone even. I suppose so. She gave me a searching look, but said nothing. I turned and pushed open the ward door. Her father was awake, propped up against the pillow. His face was still pale, but his voice carried more strength than the day before. George, you're here again. You've done so much, thank you. It's nothing, Uncle, I said, stepping forward to adjust the angle of the bed and set the meal tray across his lap. He smiled faintly. You've always been steady. Everything you do is steady. I didn't reply. Maybe he was right. Maybe people like me only know how to do the steady things. These days, I'd practically lived at the hospital. While Willow handled her work, I coordinated with the doctors, spoke with the nurses, even tracked down a copy of the Duanhuang manuscripts collection, her father's favorite book. Each night when Willow arrived to take over, I quietly slipped away. And every morning, I came back before she did. We didn't talk much, but somehow our rhythm fit, smoother, more natural than it ever had during our marriage. On the fourth afternoon, she said she wanted to go home to shower. I nodded, planning to stay until dinner. But 20 minutes after she left, my phone buzzed. Where are you? I stared at the message for a moment, then replied, at the hospital. Just finished ordering your dad's soft meal. What's wrong? She didn't answer. Still, something in my gut felt off, as if the air had subtly shifted. By dusk, her reply came. My dad wants walnut pastries from Old Street. Can you bring some for him? Then, after a pause, another message. Don't bring anything else. Thank you for everything. I stared at the screen for a long time. I didn't know whether she had found out something, or if this was just her way of saying goodbye. But I knew one thing, for Willow to say thank you at all, that already meant a lot. I hadn't done any of this to be thanked. I never wanted her to know what I'd arranged behind the scenes. But at that moment, I felt something unexpected, a quiet sense of relief, because at least, for once, she had seen it, even if only for a moment. Chapter 21. The day Willow's father was discharged from the hospital, I went early to help them get home. But the moment she walked into the ward, I could tell something was wrong. Sure enough, not long after she got back to the office, she called me and said she wanted to talk. Half an hour later, we met at the park near her company. June sunlight filtered through the plane tree leaves, scattering into shifting patches of gold. I sat on a bench waiting. When she appeared, I knew there was a major decision waiting on her lips, and I was right. She told me the company had given her an offer she couldn't refuse. President of the Asia-Pacific region, based in Singapore. For 3 years, I stared ahead at the fountain, watching the arcs of water rise and fall. I wasn't surprised. It was everything she'd ever dreamed of, and I knew it. Congratulations, I said, keeping my voice steady. That's an incredible opportunity. She looked at me for a long moment, as if waiting for me to say something else, to ask her not to go. Maybe, but I didn't. I was no longer the George from 5 years ago. The man who hid every emotion behind quiet sacrifice. If I accept it, she said at last, it means we'll be apart for at least 3 years. I nodded. I know, but that shouldn't be the reason you say no. She blinked, caught off guard, and after a moment asked softly, are you saying, you'll wait for me? I met her eyes. I'm saying, we'll figure it out together. The studio can expand. Southeast Asia's art market is growing fast. I can fly there, or set up a branch. The point is, this time, it doesn't have to be either/or. She looked at me, and for the first time, her gaze wasn't filled with anxiety, but with a quiet, human warmth. I need some time to think, she said. I reached out and brushed a leaf off her shoulder. Whatever you decide, I told her, I'll support you. But please, make the choice for yourself. Not for me, not for anyone else. She didn't answer, but I saw it, that long-lost softness in her eyes. That afternoon, we went our separate ways, neither of us pushing for what came next. The next evening, I was firing a batch of ceramics in the studio when my phone buzzed. Can we talk? Now. It was her. I replied instantly, at the studio, waiting for you. When she arrived, night had fallen completely. The light from the doorway framed her silhouette, soft, cinematic. You're just in time, I said, setting down my tools. A new batch just came out of the kiln. She walked over, looking down at the row of ceramic cups, each designed around a zodiac constellation. Her eyes lingered on one, a deep blue cup, its glaze scattered with golden specks. Like the night sky we saw on our honeymoon in the Maldives. This one is, she whispered, a custom order, I said. She didn't respond. Instead, she reached into her bag and took out 2 notebooks, one I recognized immediately, the marriage diary, the other. She slid across the table to me, her notebook, the husband-seeking diary. For a moment, I just stared. That was when it finally hit me. She hadn't been distant or indifferent lately. She'd been working through things in her own way. She was trying to understand me, on her own terms. She opened the notebook and began to read aloud. Each word trembled slightly as it left her lips. May 18th, today I went to George's studio for the first time, watching him at the pottery wheel, completely focused. I suddenly realized, maybe I never truly knew my husband. June 2nd, when Dad got sick, George was the first to show up. Now I finally understand what it means to be protected, not by material comfort, but by someone who catches you when you're at your weakest. Her voice quivered as she read. Each page felt like a layer of armor being peeled away. All those moments I thought she hadn't noticed. She had. We both had. We just didn't know how to say it. When she finished, she slid my diary back toward me. I took a breath, opened it, and began to read softly. Barely loud enough for the two of us to hear. September 3, 2019. Willow worked 48 hours straight before coming home. She fell asleep on the sofa. I took off her shoes and covered her with a blanket. Saw a blister on her ankle from new heels. She never complains, never shows weakness. And somehow, that only makes me ache for her more. I wish, just once, she could lean on me, without feeling like she has to stand on her own. I kept reading. From beside me, I heard the sound of her quiet sobs. I didn't stop, because she had the right to know. To know that the men she'd always thought of as calm, ordinary, and easily content, had, countless nights, silently whispered into the dark. Are you tired? I wish you'd lean on me, just once. We sat there, turning page after page, passage after passage, retracing the last 5 years, as if we were untangling a knot that had been wound tight for too long. When I finally closed the notebook and was about to speak, she spoke first. I've decided to turn down the Asia-Pacific position. My heart clenched. I was about to object, but she gently pressed her hand over mine, steady, resolute. She told me it wasn't sacrifice. It was choice. For herself. She said she'd already contacted a headhunter, found several new opportunities, and that she wanted to become a partner at my studio. We could create together, she said, do what we love, without either of us having to step aside. Listening to her, I didn't reply right away. Instead, I walked to the workbench, opened a drawer, and pulled out a folder I'd been preparing for days. Yes, I'd already been ready. When she opened it, I saw the shimmer of tears in her eyes. Peak View, Southeast Asia Expansion Proposal. She looked up, her lips trembling. When did you make this? These past few days, I said quietly. I don't want to love you through sacrifice anymore. I want to love you through building, through what we create together. She threw her arms around me, tears soaking into my shirt. I didn't move away. Then she whispered, through her tears, that she had a better idea. 2 years in Singapore, she said, and then we'll go to Berlin together. Her eyes shone. You owe yourself that Berlin project, and I can work remotely. I looked at her, and my heart softened completely. I nodded. In that moment, I knew she had truly changed, and she truly loved. Then she reached into her bag and took out a small box. Inside, a pair of platinum rings. identical to the ones from our wedding. She smiled softly. "These aren't remarriage rings," she said. "They're a promise to begin again." I didn't speak. I simply knelt down on one knee, just like I did back then. And yet, this time, it was something entirely different. "Willow," I said, voice trembling. "Will you give me another chance? Not to go back, but to begin again, as the people we were always meant to become." She smiled through her tears, and in that glow, her eyes sparkled like the stars over the Maldives that night so long ago. She nodded. Chapter 22. She arrived at La Seine restaurant, on time. 5 minutes earlier than me. I was sitting by the window, the familiar river view flowing quietly behind me. I held the menu in my hands but hadn't read a single word. 5 years ago today, she had been 2 hours late. I sat here back then, staring at a table of cold dishes. And in the end, all I got was a text from her assistant. That night, I walked away carrying the last piece of paper from our marriage, the divorce agreement. But tonight, she was different. A pale-colored dress, steady steps, clear eyes. When she entered, I immediately stood up and pulled out her chair. "Happy anniversary," I heard myself say, my voice unconsciously softer than usual. She smiled, met my eyes as she sat down, and in that single glance, I knew we had finally turned the page. Dinner flowed naturally from start to finish. We talked about new orders at the studio, and about the company she'd soon be joining. She mentioned maybe adopting a dog, and asked whether I preferred Shiba Inus or Border Collies. I said lightly, "Whichever one you like." And she rolled her eyes at me, playful, alive. We were like two ordinary people at the start of something new. Getting to know each other again. Learning to fall into rhythm again. No old sharpness. No wary silences. Just us, rediscovering ease. When dessert arrived, I reached into my pocket and took out a small brocade box I'd kept hidden for a long time. She stiffened slightly, as if she'd guessed something and guessed wrong. "Don't panic," I said with a smile. "Just open it." She did, and froze. Inside was a tiny ceramic cup, no bigger than her thumb. "Turn it over," I said. She carefully flipped it, and her fingertips brushed against a row of carved numbers. 2018, 6/15, our wedding day. For a few seconds, she was silent. Then her gaze softened. I took out a second cup. "This one's for the day of our first fight, 2019, 4/7. She gave a small, quiet mm. One by one, I lifted each cup from the box. 7 in total, each one different in shape and glaze. Each one representing a moment in our story. The day we met, falling in love, the wedding, the first argument, the silence, the reunion, and the last cup was the largest, a coffee mug. She looked at it, hesitant. As I handed it to her, on the bottom, the carved date read, 2023, 5/20, the day we divorced. She looked up at me, voice barely above a whisper. "That day is worth remembering too." I took her hand, looked straight into her eyes, and nodded. "Especially that day," I said. "Without it, we wouldn't have become who we are now." Her eyes turned red, while her emotions softened just a little. I slowly lifted from the cup the ring I had designed myself. It wasn't our old wedding band. I had deliberately chosen a new design, a main diamond, flanked by 2 small sapphires. Just like my Starry Night pottery series, quiet, profound, yet glimmering with hope. I stood, then knelt halfway before her, took a steady breath, and said, "Willow." I looked straight into her eyes. "Will you marry me again? Not to return to our old marriage, but to begin a new journey, 2 more complete people, loving each other in a healthier way." She didn't answer. She just kissed me. She pulled me up and held me tight, fierce, certain, and full of resolve, like every important decision she had ever made in her life, decisive, brave, and leaving no way back. When we finally sat down again, I realized the sound around us, applause. People in the restaurant were smiling. A few cheering. Even the waiter nodded with a grin. I lowered my head, embarrassed, just about to say something to break the tension, when she suddenly reached into her bag and pulled something out. A small, lopsided clay figurine. "I made it," she said. "My first piece, under your guidance." She set it on the table, at the base of the tiny figure. She had carved today's date, and beneath it, a line of handwriting. "Please take care of me for the rest of our lives." I looked at the crooked little figure, and laughed until my eyes filled with tears. Then, with full solemnity, I placed it beside the row of ceramic cups. To others, it must have looked like the most mismatched display imaginable, but to me, it was priceless, because that was our story, real, imperfect, and utterly sincere. When we left the restaurant, I stopped by the door, reached into my jacket pocket, and took out a key. I placed it in her palm. She looked at me, confused, her eyes full of question marks. "The studio key," I said softly. "You're always welcome home." The way she gripped that key, I'll remember it for the rest of my life. Her palm was small but strong, and the metal teeth left faint marks in her skin. She looked at me then, and in her eyes, there was no doubt, no hesitation. Only, for the first time between us, nothing left unseen.